folks, welcome back to the channel. It has definitely been a minute. I wanted to get an update out of just some things going on the last couple of weeks now, about almost a month, I guess it's probably been, and talk about some other news you can use, as they say, from the Postgres community. So I think the last time we spoke was after the hurricane that passed through Florida, Hurricane Milton, I guess. Yeah, not Helene. That was the one before it that didn't do any real damage, and then Milton created a big mess that spent a lot of time cleaning up on, and then went to Greece after that for pgconf EU. It was a fantastic time for me. I think people had a great time at the conference. It was the biggest conference that they've had in Europe for the pgconf EU folks, and I believe was also the largest sort of dedicated Postgres conference that has been had to date. It is possible that there might have been some conferences, I think like maybe one or two in India that could have exceeded that, or maybe even Japan. But I guess, I don't know, probably Brazil as well. I don't know. So maybe, I don't know. If you know of conferences that were larger, I think they had about, if I remember correctly, it was like 750, 800 people, somewhere in that range for folks. But as a dedicated Postgres conference, that's pretty good. We're definitely getting the numbers up there. We'll see where they take it from there. I know when you get into that like 750 range, I've run a fair number of conferences. When you get up into that range, venue selection gets to be really difficult because you kind of pass through. There's an area of like, I would say 500 and below where you can go to like hotels and other sort of smaller venues and do your conferences there, and they have the facilities and they can support that level. But as you creep up towards like 1,000, then you start getting into like you need actual event space, convention center space, like that type of stuff. And so the price situation just kind of changes significantly depending on what you can find and where you're trying to go. So I don't believe they've announced where the next pgconf EU is going to be. Presumably someplace in Europe. But outside of that, I'm not sure. But I definitely had a great time. It was my first trip to Europe since the pandemic. So I got to see a whole bunch of people that I had not seen in quite some time. Hung out with some friends, spent a few days after the conference in Greece. Really liked it. Now, sort of angling like, how do I go back there on a regular basis? Because I think, I don't know, maybe it was just like the extra relaxation having dealt with like hurricane cleanup and all that before we went on the trip. But yeah, really had a good time. And again, the conference itself seemed pretty good. I'll be honest, like I spent like I said, first time to Europe in like 5 years, so I spent a lot of time in the hallway track just talking to all kinds of people, catching up with folks and seeing where they were at. Still a lot of folks in Europe I haven't seen since then, so hopefully maybe I'll get back over there and be able to catch up with even more folks. But it was pretty good. If I had to pick a talk or two, I did go to some talks. Probably the one I would recommend, I think that this one is out on YouTube, is a talk that Claire Giordano did. She works for Microsoft, and she did a talk about, it was titled like, What's in a Postgres Major Release? It was an analysis of the contributions in the sort of version 17 development cycle. And it goes into all kinds of sort of different ways that people contribute into this thing that we call Postgres and the Postgres community during that sort of, I think she said it was 16-month time period. So I think it's pretty interesting. It's a light watch, but to see just sort of how a lot of this stuff comes together. A few of us who are kind of involved in community stuff, like we've done some additional analysis on it, and it was really a tremendous amount of work that I hope she will present that at some future Postgres conferences. One, because the people involved could always use some more shout outs. It goes pretty deep into different things like extensions and who's on different community like working groups and board situations and that kind of stuff. So you get to see some of that pulled back together. So and Claire brings solid production value to the conference talks that she does. So it's done. It's like really deep analysis, heavy work, and put into a nice presentation. So would totally recommend to check that out if you can. I believe Daniel Gustafson, I'm going to credit, as been sort of a collaborator on that talk, but it was presented by Claire. So um, again, definitely check that out. I'll give a, just so as not to play favorites, I guess, or whatever, to wimp out on what's the best talk. Another talk I really did appreciate was a talk called A Deep Dive into Postgres Statistics. It was by Louise Grandjonc, I believe is how you pronounce her name. She is French. She works for Crunchy Data, and it dove into like sort of how the statistics tables come together, and she does it with this like public data set on like health conditions and stuff like that, which was just a really nice data set to work with for examples. Very easy to sort of wrap your head around, what you would expect certain pieces of data and how it would relate to each other, even though that may not be your field, but like we've all had to deal with like health stuff, right? So it's kind of easy to wrap your head around it. So that was a really nice one. It harkened back in my mind to the kind of original explain talk that I did that was based on some work that Greg Mullane had done, where I sort of walked through like how do cost estimates work, like where does the Postgres like store this information and how does it pull that out, and actually do some math to show you like here's how a cost estimate comes together based on variables in the system and that kind of stuff, and then it goes into that kind of a thing. So I really liked it, and if you're into wanting to know how Postgres statistics work, like it's worth checking out. Again, I don't know like what the release schedule is for videos from the conference, or even which ones will be up or not up. But if that one becomes available, definitely would check it out. You probably could get a fair amount from the slides, I think, but certainly be nice if you can see the video. So if you're into that kind of thing, feel free to check either of those out. Otherwise, I guess I would just say, like, if you ever get the chance to go to Greece, um, certainly I think it's worth the trip. So maybe you'll run into me there. That would be nice. Well, we'll see. So don't forget, like you can always go. We went to like the Acropolis and Parthenon. I'm pretty sure everybody does that. It's one of those like if you go to Athens in particular and you don't see those things, I'm sure you'll get questions. So we did go see them, and it's pretty interesting. So there's also a rock out front of the Parthenon area where Paul spoke, and that kind of stuff. Like it's just interesting to wrap your head around these things that from thousands of years ago. That we sort of have a written history of it, but it kind of comes to real life. So, in any case, like I said, definitely loved it. Love the food. Coffee game is strong. Espressos there were particularly good. So totally recommend a visit to Athens and or Greece, as it were. So that was great. After that, I went to the past Data Summit, which is traditionally has been a Microsoft-oriented event that is now put on by Redgate and now is a little more multi-database, certainly has a stronger Postgres contingent than it used to have. That is in Seattle. So one sort of funny aspect of these trips. So I went from the East Coast to Greece. While I was in Greece, they did their daylight savings change. Came back to the East Coast. We did our daylight savings change. I was only here for like 4 days, and then went out to Seattle on election day. So that was interesting as well. Didn't really know how that was going to turn out, and what I always tell people, if you're concerned, I like to say every election of my lifetime, they have told me, has been the most important election ever. And so be proud of America, because apparently we have always gotten it right, because we are still here. So if you're questioning whether we got it right this time, I suppose there's always people with certain trepidations that worry on. But again, like we're batting 1,000. Like we've never gotten it wrong. Like we've always still been here. So not every country gets it right every time. So far, we're good. So have faith, I guess, that maybe we've got it right this time, or we'll at least persevere. So all that said, past Data Summit I thought again was really good. Conference as a whole, I really like the production value. Redgate does a great job. They know how to put on an event. I also like the intermingling. I don't know how much intermingling goes on between like SQL Server and Postgres folks. I think like if you're a SQL Server DBA and you are suddenly being tasked with being a Postgres DBA as part of your job, I can't imagine that there's a better conference to go to. How much the individual attendees intermingle, I'm not sure. I kind of remember like we had this feeling with the old Velocity conferences where there were a bunch of us that were kind of more on the ops side, practitioners and doing like system design and benchmarking and performance. And then there was the other half of the conference, if you want to look at it that way, that was really more front end, like web architecture, web design, but like design from a performance standpoint. And there was a lot of overlap in this idea of like measuring stuff and doing performance work and scalability and being able to manage websites that are high velocity, as sort of where the thing came from. And I always thought it was really unfortunate before O'Reilly got out of the game, they pulled those two aspects of that conference apart into their own thing. I think they lost a lot of value, even though like we always question like how much intermingling does actually go on between the two sort of sides of the conference. Like I do feel like there was enough intermingling. I don't think it takes doesn't you don't need a lot. If it's 10 to 20% of your people are cross mingling, like that's enough for ideas to sort of cross populate. So that's one of the aspects I really do like about Pass, and Redgate as sort of a steward that is outside of Microsoft as the previous sort of past shepherds, and outside of the Postgres community, and that like they're not selling Postgres as a service like many of the sort of more regular names that we see at the conference. So I think they're a pretty good steward of that, and I hope they keep going forward. I will say one thing that was a little bit weird. There was this sort of cross-event run Postgres conference group that was also going kind of at the same time as a portion of Pass. So Pass had sort of mainline Postgres tracks and then these other tracks. I think it was a little confusing for attendees as to like which tracks they were supposed to go to or allowed to go to or how all that boiled out. So I'm hoping they don't do it like that again. And instead maybe just expand the Postgres content, because it did seem like there was enough uh, demand for that. So I don't know. We'll see how it all shapes up for next year. Um, and I presume I may go back. I don't know. No plans at the moment, but we're kind of a long way out. Again, I probably did go to more talks, although I didn't go to, I guess, as many like sort of traditional Postgres talks. Thinking about it, I went to a few different SQL Server talks, and then sort of these hybrid talks. Like if I'm picking, like, let's say if I was going to recommend, and I think the way that Pass does it, if I remember correctly, you can buy a video pass once they get all of the videos processed for all of the talks. So if you want to get access to all the talks that were there, I believe you can do that. Um, when I think about like, I didn't go to this talk, but I know Bruce Momjen was there and he gave his Postgres Query Optimizer talk. I've seen that talk, I don't know, at least twice, maybe three times. I think it's a good talk if you're getting into Postgres and you want to know how it works, sort of at a more internal level. Would totally recommend it. I didn't go to it because like I've seen it a number of times, right? So I spent time doing other stuff. So if I were going to give a shout out to a different talk that I really did enjoy, one that I would give a shout out was to Janice Griffin, who I think currently works for Quest Software, if I remember correctly. But she is a longtime person in the sort of database performance space. I want to actually say she started on Oracle. I may be wrong about that, but she's definitely done like SQL Server stuff. And then she gave a talk which was titled "Can SQL Server DBAs or developers tune queries on Postgres?" And she sort of walked through, I think it was Foglight was the main tool that she was using, and talked a little bit about like how explain plans work and how you do performance tuning. And again, like I always find it very interesting that there's so much overlap between like a given Oracle DBA or a SQL Server DBA or a Postgres DBA. Like the amount of information that you have, even though it feels very confusing, I suppose. if you are now stepping into one of these other databases, because so much of what you know, especially the deeper you know one given database, like you have to sort of realize like you're gonna have to rethink a bunch of that in order to function on the new database. But realistically, like 80% of it or whatever will transfer. So it's not like stepping into, like when I first started working with React, and it's just a totally different, you're looking at Erlang instead of like C code, and that was wild. And then you're just in a different kind of operating environment, and it's distributed hash sort of, you know, that like those NoSQL systems, I just feel can be quite a bit different than like a relational database compared to going from one relational database to another. Um, so all that was going on. I really like Jana's talk. She sort of, again, she talks about many things that she's bringing from her background, having done performance work in databases for a long time, and then like looking at it in Postgres. And so I think that one is probably worth watching, even if you were just a junior Postgres person and you had, were trying to, and junior is kind of a relative term, or new to Postgres. Not even if you're like coming from SQL Server, just somebody new to Postgres could watch that, and I think would get a lot of value out of it, seeing how she approaches performance tuning and whatnot. So, uh, so again, shout out to Janice Griffin. And again, I think those, like Bruce's talk is probably available somewhere on YouTube or something. Like I'm sure he's done that at like PGCon in the past. So you probably can find a copy of his talk for sure already. The other one, I don't know if she's ever done that elsewhere, but again, like watch for past summit announcements as far as like virtual passes being available to watch those videos. Um, so that's past summit. I do believe it is going to happen again. I'm pretty sure they set dates out for like more or less the same week in November in Seattle next year. Again, this is a pretty nice conference to go to and whatnot. So would recommend at least looking it over once more information comes out. So check that out. Kind of the final thing I just wanted to talk about real quickly, since we last spoke, as they say, Postgres 17 did get released. I think I had mentioned, I think that last video came out right around the release date for 17. And then what has kind of, it's been interesting to watch, and something has gone horribly wrong in the world, I guess. So not only was Postgres 17 released, but Postgres 17.1 was released as well. And it turned out there were sort of two problems in there. So one was it had this like ABI change. If you're like an extension developer and using like just, I think there was one, maybe two different internal function calls that you may be calling. And excuse me, if you were calling those, like you had to recompile your extension against 17.1 because the interface had changed internally. So that caused some breakage for people. And then there was another one. Let me grab some half and half. There was another problem where alter role set role equals broke, which I believe it just stopped working, which was part of a fix for something else. That has been addressed, and that was kind of a more significant sort of breaking change. Like I think if you're running a cloud, I know Timescale Cloud was the one I think was most affected by this because they actually make use of the internal interface piece in the first problem. But as a cloud provider, like they're checking for this stuff. They're working with, they've got hackers that work on Postgres, so they're on the hackers mailing list. And like this issue surfaced, but it was addressed. And so they're going to take care of that for you and sort of let you know if you're a Timescale Cloud user, like what you have to do. And so I think any cloud provider, like that's part of why you're paying to be in their service, right? Is that they're looking at this stuff and kind of making sure that you'll be okay. The other thing was a little more concerning because it's, probably if you're using that alter role, set role, you're probably using it for some kind of like security permissions thing. And so that is more of a silent problem that happens. In any case, I will also tell you, like, actually, you really should not do that. I've used that technique a number of times over the years, and there are a few sort of really weird corner cases you can get into when you do that, as far as, I think mostly it's in like trigger permissions and writing to tables and whatnot, where you can kind of end up with these weird orphaned objects that can't be dropped, and it gets really bizarre. So really don't actually like that pattern, but having used it, and I know other people use it because bugs were reported. Um, Postgres folks have decided to do it's not really a re-release; it's a out of sequence release. So normally, if you're unaware, the way Postgres works, like they do a major release, and then usually about a month later, I guess it was like last week or so, they do the first sort of minor release when the new major comes out, and then it's about every 3 months after that there's another set of minor releases to take accumulated changes and whatnot. They will occasionally do one out of sequence. Usually it's around a security issue where it needs to kind of go out, immediately. But it can be if there's a breaking change that's severe enough. I actually don't remember the last time they did this, but they have done it before, so it's not impossible for it to happen. Um, but I believe tomorrow they should be dropping 17.2, and this is actually goes back across all of the minor versions, even the last 12 release, which I don't recall which one it is, like 12.25 or something probably, was supposed to be that last set of releases that had just gone out. They will be doing another 12 release, which is the end of life notice. So putting together a little video on Postgres 12 end of life, which I hope to have out soon. But just be aware, like if you hear, hey, Postgres has a release coming out, and you're like, didn't I just hear about this like like a week or two ago? They were telling me this. There's a new one coming out, and you need to get on that new one. I suspect that most cloud providers, like if you're in Amazon or whatever, like they probably will eliminate the 17.1 as an option to pick, because really nobody should get on that release at this point. And if you did upgrade, I mean, you're probably okay to stay on there if you had a particular window, if you don't get hit by one of these two. And again, check the release notes because there may be some other things that get put into the release. But if you don't get struck by one of those problems, then you probably are okay. But I would also say if you haven't, don't go to 17.1, go directly to 17.2. And if it's not a problem for you, I would recommend get off of 17.1 and go to 17.2 as soon as you can. So want to just kind of bring that up because again, it's kind of a rare event. I like I said, I don't remember. I don't think we ever did this in the 16 cycle. I don't recall doing it in the 15 cycle. So my guess is it was like maybe 3 years ago, somewhere in that range. In the 14 cycle, we may have done it. And usually I do think it is around when a new release goes out, just because I guess it's new and people are shaking it on down, as they say. But anyways, yeah. So that's the hot news in Postgres land as far as the upcoming release, which again I believe is going to drop tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that, and keep an eye out with your service provider. One thing to manage, if you're wondering if you're on a good service provider, is how they're handling this process. I think for many people, it probably isn't a big issue. Their providers are probably on top of this. If you never actually got 17.1, like this is the rare case. I know a lot of folks are like, we make the minor release available on day one. This is the rare case where, well, if you don't actually make it available on day one, you may have actually benefited from not having done that upgrade, but be that as it may. Other than that, I've got nothing else. No things on the schedule for next year at the moment. I'm sure some things will eventually come up. I probably will be at DevNexus, which is running basically the same week as Scale. So if you're thinking of going to either of those two, for me, I will probably go to the one. DevNexus is in Atlanta. I went to it last year. I really did enjoy it. So I suspect I'll be there again. I need to look. I probably will try to submit something this time around. But even if not, I'll see if Postgres Booth needs help. So again, they put together a pretty good show there. So I'll probably do that versus anything else, but we'll see. At the moment, nothing officially booked. So other than that, I think that's it for now. As I always say, now more than ever, I suppose. If you can, make sure to take care of yourselves. And beyond that, if you can, take care of your databases as well. I will see you in the next one. Have a good one.